could you use for pressing, and what will come out the best? Well, the best ones to get are simple flowers. So I'm showing you here a group of flowers that you can find. I found them in my garden. A daisy flower would be good. What you have to imagine is the flower will go face down onto your piece of paper to press. So something like a complicated rose would be very difficult to press flat, whereas something like a daisy flower, you could imagine would quite easily press flat, and I'll show you what we're going to do later on. So that's one example that I've got. Other examples are, for instance, this bedding geranium here, and you can see it's actually made up of lots of flowers. You can see the buds at the bottom. So what you can do is just pluck off individual flowers from the main head, and then you end up again, as I said, with a simple, nicely coloured flower that's easy to press. So that's a geranium, or pelargonium, which is the actual name. But you've probably got lots in your flowering beds and baskets. Another similarly grown plant is a hydrangea. So again, lots of individual flowers on a head. So this is a lovely blue one. And again, I'm going to pluck just one of the flowers off, or many of them, and then I can just use that. And I've got a lovely simple flower there. So what else have I got? Hardy geraniums have very simple flowers too. So these are nice bright pink ones. Nice to get a selection of different colours too. So that when you make the sort of pictures or the illustrations you want to make with your pressed flowers, you've got a range of flowers. These are lovely. So this are primrose type flower. And you can see you've got a lovely purpley blue colour on the outside and a lovely yellow centre. And again, a stem with lots of flowers on it. So again, you can pluck off the individual flower, and that's what you're going to press. So those are great to use. If you want to use slightly more complicated flowers, little stems of, difficult to see this, but a little stem of small flowers, you could use a whole stem and experiment, see what happens. You may find it makes a nice display when you've pressed it. I also found that fuchsias, but very simple fuchsias. So you can get fuchsias and have very complicated ones, but these ones are the hardy fuchsias that grow in quite big bushes. And because they're very simple flowers, again, I'm going to pluck one off the stem, they might work quite well. Find ones that are better developed. That wasn't a very good one. Here's one where the petals are. There's more petals. There's a nice purpley colour inside. It's darker. So that's another good one. So there's lots of choice in simple flowers that you can use for pressing. If you also want to get some different texture, maybe go for some foliage. So this is a Japanese maple. Can you see the leaves are very cut and interesting? And also you can get Japanese maples come in lots of different colours. So they come in dark purples as well. So that's quite a nice thing to choose. Or you could use ferns. So difficult to see against the green of my background, but there you go, now you can see it better. So there's a fern which I'll show you we can use for all sorts of things after we press them. So that's an easy thing to access. And here I've got, this is smokebush or cotinus, and look, each individual leaf is a lovely dark purple colour, and they're very simple, and those would be great to use for pressing as well. So when's the best time to collect your flowers and leaves? Don't collect them first thing in the morning, because they may have dew on them. And what you want when you're pressing is to have leaves or flowers or foliage which is dry, not dried in the way we might dry flowers, but that there's no wet on them. If you have any dampness on any of the things, especially these sort of light pink coloured flowers, what will happen is they will brown when they press and they're not very attractive. So try and pick them later in the day when the sun's got on them or when it's not raining. Now that might be impossible to actually achieve. And in that case, collect your samples, put them in a jar with water at the bottom because you don't want them actually to dry out. You just want the surface to dry. And then put them indoors somewhere that's airy and warm, and they let them dry out before you use them. So what do we do next? Well, what we need, we haven't got a professional flower press to use. We're going to use books. So what you need is some heavy books like this, nice heavy books available, and some paper. Now I've used kitchen roll because it's easily available, it's not expensive, and it works very well. And I'll show you some of the ones I've already done. So those are the things we need. So what we do, now just clear the way so that the book doesn't get, I've got one book, which I'm going to open up in the middle as much as, so there's the weight underneath and above. So it doesn't matter where exactly. I'm going to lay my paper on it. So it's ready to take what I'm going to use. Now, when I take my flowers, and I'm going to take some individual flowers, what I'm going to do is just snip off the bottom of it, because actually all I want is the flower. I don't need, in this case, the stem, although you can use it. So I've snipped off the bottom so that there's nothing else there, and put the attractive look down flat onto my paper. And I'm going to do an arrangement with lots of different ones so that when they're pressed, snip the bottom of that one. You can leave some of the green on, it doesn't matter. Make sure it's dry, nice and dry. And maybe I'm going to use some leaves as well. I'm going to leave a little bit of the stem on the end because I might want that as part of my arrangement when I'm making my craft. So I'm going to put those down flat. You can put a mixture of all sorts of different flowers onto and leaves onto your paper. You can perhaps edit it. If I want to use my fern, perhaps I don't want that much of my fern, so I'll do slightly less, put that down as well. So fill that all up with everything you want, and then put another, carefully cover everything with another piece of kitchen roll. Now, if you haven't got this, you can use cartridge paper, photocopying paper, or white tissue paper. And I have read that you can use newspaper, but I haven't actually done it because I don't have a newspaper, as we don't. So shut it up so that everything is firm. And then you need more weight onto it so that they're pressed. So put more books. In fact, what you could do is I could put this book and then another book next to it so that it's nice and firmly pressed. You can use bricks if you want to, but I'm sure somewhere around you've got old directories or other books you can put on. And you're going to leave that for 2 weeks. So it seems quite a long time, but it's quickly done. And then in 2 weeks' time, I will show you what you should have. Just going to put this one away. So here are some that I did earlier. My Blue Peter. So here's my book. Now, you may find, as you see here, that some of the flowers and leaves are sticking to the paper. So just very carefully, you could use tweezers if you want, just very carefully nudge them off, because by this point now they're pressed, they're dry, and they're quite delicate. So you can see there's my primula dried. So they keep the colour, they should keep the colour. Here's a clematis. It's got folded over, but I can unfold it. A purple clematis. Now, what you can probably all see, but I will take off, is that some of these flowers from my geranium have gone brown. I don't know whether you can see that there's a slightly browned. I'll put it on the white paper. And that means that they were perhaps slightly damp, or that they actually were quite old flowers. So you might have that happen, but I have been successful with other ones. So you experiment, things happen. Here's the fuchsia. So I hope you can see the detail on that. Also, I did some procosmia. So they're not a single flower, but they seem to have pressed very well. And that gives you a nice shape too. So very gently, remember to very gently peel them off. And they should be now ready to use. So I'm going to keep them there until I'm ready to put them into something so they're safe. I've got actually 2 lots there to use. I'm just going to show you another way of pressing, which you may have heard about, which is pressing using an iron. So I did an experiment, and the way to press using an iron is you do the same thing as I've done in preparation, get the right flowers, get the leaves, and cut them so that they're small enough unless you want to have a stem on it. What you do is you put them again between 2 leaves of paper, and you press it with a heavy book for a little while so they are flat before you iron them. And so you've got rid of any texture that might be underneath. Then you iron them with a cool iron, which has no steam, because again, you don't want moisture, because moisture doesn't work with pressed flowers. It'll make them rot in the end. So I did that. I found that on the coolest setting, it was a bit too cool, so I had to turn it up slightly. So it really depends on the temperature of your iron. But you don't press by moving it, you press by pressing it down hard, then moving it across, checking every now and again, are things drying? So this is the result. I don't think it's terribly successful, except the leaves seem to have dried quite well and pressed quite well. But my lovely blue hydrangea, I'll remind you, here is my blue hydrangea, and this is the colour that happened. So they've completely bleached of any colour. So it hasn't worked at all for them. And I think other light things like the geranium flower, it doesn't work as well. So my experience, and maybe different if you do it, is that tougher things like leaves, and I had some Virginia creeper leaves, they've worked quite well too. So these dark things have worked well, but the lighter hydrangeas and geraniums, not so well. But it's worth an experiment just to see how it works.